Welcome back everyone, and thanks as always for joining me here in the Build Your Own BPOS course. You should be learning lots at this point and hopefully enjoying it too. So following up from the previous lessons on accounts, this one should be on the shorter side with a look at the workflow for importing accounts using a scheduled job. Now, full disclosure, depending on the order that you've watched these sessions in, you may or may not have seen the lesson yet where we cover an overview of scheduled jobs. So if you would like to watch that one first, it's a bit on the shorter side as well, around 30 minutes or so. That might be beneficial for you. However, you should still be able to understand what's going on here even if you don't watch that first. Just bear in mind that I will not be going through all of the details of the general scheduled job configurations, only the settings that pertain specifically to the import accounts scheduled job that we will see in this session. But anyway, as I said, this one's going to be relatively short, so no agenda aside from the timestamps that I will have put up on the screen here. Let's just jump over into back office and we'll get into it. Alright, so as a prerequisite, you will need to have the import file saved, but we'll get to that in a minute. And by the way, the full account import file specs can be found in my BPOS. Just search for the term account import, and the article is called account/supplier import specifications, at least at the time that I'm recording this, that's what the article is called. So that's account/supplier import specifications. And that will have all the details as far as the field names and their required formats, along with the descriptions of each. So when we get into it, we will, I'll show you the example file that I will be using in our demo here, but it will only have a handful of the about 40-ish account fields that we can import data for when we are importing and creating or updating accounts using this account import scheduled job. Which reminds me, I should mention that not only can this scheduled job import new accounts, but it can also update existing accounts in the database. But anyway, to get started here, I will run through a bit of the scheduled job basics for anyone who is completely unfamiliar. So we will need to head to the system setup menu, and we will head to our scheduled jobs component here. I'll open that up. Of course, just make sure that the operator that you're logged in as has the privilege enabled to maintain scheduled jobs so that you will be able to open this as well. But that will open our scheduled jobs list for us. Now, I've got a couple scheduled jobs already created in this database, but if you haven't gotten to the lesson on scheduled jobs just yet, yours is probably going to be blank unless you or someone else has gone ahead and added some scheduled jobs in your database already. But what we will need to do first is go with add job, and we'll have our new job maintenance window open up here for us. I will just give this one a name, and you'll see why in a minute that I've labeled this as Tier 1B. And yeah, then we will need to actually select the specific job that we need. So I will leave the job type as external DLL. We'll need to set the DLL name to job export. And the class name that we're looking for importing accounts is import accounts. Cool, so we can see from the short description here that this will be used to import accounts from text file. The from text file is important there too, by the way. It does need to be a TXT file. And yeah, all these general configuration settings at the top, like I said, we will not get into in this lesson because we do cover them in depth in the separate session on scheduled jobs. If you're unfamiliar with what any of these are or what they can be used for, I would strongly recommend reviewing that lesson if you haven't already. And yeah, as for the scheduling component itself here, this shouldn't need much of an explanation. Just set whichever schedule you'd like to, maybe once daily at startup or weekly at midnight or Sundays or whatever is required for your organization, but I will just be leaving that alone for our demonstration here. Then for the job options down here, you can see that we've got quite a few flags to consider and fields to complete. We will actually skip down. We'll skip over the flags for now. We'll skip down to these fields and drop downs, and we'll circle back up to the flags afterwards. Some of the flags will make a bit more sense afterwards because they relate to the fields and to the file, which we'll be looking at in a minute. So for the file name to import, what we need to enter here is exactly that, the name of the file. The one that I've got saved for our demo is called import accounts, no space. Yours obviously might be named something completely different, but whatever the file name is just needs to be entered here exactly as it's saved. And just to reiterate from a minute ago, it does need to be in a TXT format. And of course, follow the file spec, which I mentioned can be found in its entirety in my BPOS. That file, formatted correctly, should contain all of the account records that need to be imported into the system's database using this scheduled job. And we'll get through this next setting and I'll show you that file that I will be using. But for this next one, the extra directory info field, you can see the tooltip here as I hover over that. But this is the local directory location where the account import files are going to be saved prior to being imported. So if I actually open my file explorer, for how I've got things configured here and set up in my database in my system, is I have that import accounts file being saved in this BPOS data import directory. So what I'm going to do is just copy this location, paste it into that field. Again, this is something where your organization may import the file from a different location, so just make sure that it's accurate for your database. But back to that file location. This is the file that I will be importing. So anytime that the job that we're creating here is run, the system is going to be looking for a file with this exact name in this exact location. If it doesn't find it, the job will not be successful, and the accounts, of course, will not be imported. If I open this file, we can have a quick look. Again, I'll mention this for the last time, but the complete file spec, including all field names, descriptions, and required formats, can be found in my BPOS. But for what I do have here, I'll move this more to the center of the screen for us. For what I do have here, notice that the first line simply contains the field names that we can reference and then see what all this data down here is actually for. So this is a comma delimited file, by the way, as you can tell. And in this case, we are only importing a fraction of the 40-ish possible account fields that we could import. So we've got our account number, card number, first name, last name, so on and so forth. Again, just about 10 or so different account fields that we are importing using this file, but we do have about 40 or so that we can import. Even then, some of the accounts that I've got here don't have information available. So you can see for a couple of these, we don't have titles, and there's just a comma with nothing there, and then followed by the next comma. But anyway, that's okay. The import procedure will just ignore those fields as well as any other fields that are not included in this file. So I will just go ahead and close that so we can import that in just a bit. Head back to our scheduled job here. The next field down is our archive directory. This is the location where, after successful import, there's going to be a file called accountimported.txt. This is where that file is going to be located. And each time that this job is run successfully, the accounts that have been imported will be added to that file. So any records that were imported previously and added to that archive file will still be there, and new ones will just keep adding to it. In our case, we do have an archive folder in that BPOS data directory too, so I will just go ahead and enter that. And we'll see when we go through the demo that the file will be there. Now the next field down may not be required. I don't need it here for how I'm configuring this job and running it, but what it would be used for is scenarios where a flag file is required, which is a separate file that flags that a new import file is ready. That flag file name just needs to be entered here. Actually, if I hover over that, that pretty much tells us exactly what I've just said. Cool, then next down, we have our import format. So a little drop down here. For this, we do need to select the appropriate format, which may be determined by an integration or interface that's being used in your system. If I open that up, we can see a few different options that we've got there. In our case, I'm just going to have that set to standard. And I will skip over this polling mode seconds. For now, it's related to a flag that we'll come back to. So lastly down here is our default import into group dropdown. This is exactly what that sounds like. We do need to select an account group from the database where the imported account records will be stored. Now for completely new account records, that's where they'll be placed. And for existing account records that are matched during the import process, they will also be moved to this group if they are not there already. So for our example here, you can probably guess given the name that I gave this job, but I want to import these accounts into our Tier 1B account group. Cool, then back up to these flags. A lot of these are self-explanatory. Some of them are related to topics that we have not gotten to in this course and will not be getting into. But regardless, we will just quickly cover each one of these just to be as comprehensive as possible. So yeah, the first one, skip first line, you can probably guess what that is referring to. If it's on, which we do want it on for our demo here, the first line in the text field will be skipped. So for any instances where the file includes that leading line with the field names, which we saw in our file, we do want to turn this flag on. Next down is the continual polling mode, and what this will do, if it's turned on, we can actually see if I hover over that. The tooltip here, I'll just read this. It says, this will cause the job to run continuously and look for an import file according to the polling mode seconds field. So that's what the polling mode seconds field is referring to. If that flag is turned on, then we would want to set the number of seconds here for how much time will need to elapse between the job polling and checking for the import file. I'm going to leave that off for our demo here, but if you are in a database or in a system organization where you would like to implement continual polling mode, just turn that flag on and then enter the amount of seconds there to elapse before each iteration of the polling there. Cool, then next down we have force proper case, very straightforward here. I'll just read out the tooltip for this one as well, if I can get it to come up. There we go. All text fields will be changed to lowercase except the first character being uppercase, so exactly what that sounds like, forcing proper case. Then for import into sorted groups, what that will do is create additional groups within the designated default import group, one for each letter of the alphabet. If I hover over that, you can read that. And it will place the account records into each one of those based on the last names. For use template account, this one is a nice time saver, very useful for instances where we would want all of the accounts that are being imported into the database to have the same base settings initially upon import. All we would need to do, if I hover over this, you can read that too. All we would need to do is first have an account created in the system with an account number that has the word template entered. Then however that template account is then configured, those base settings will be used for all accounts that are imported. So a good use case for the use group settings flag and having things that aren't going to be included in the group settings, so things like the credit limit, discount limit, etc., to all be the same for all imported accounts. Cool, then next column over as we start to finish up with this, we've got at the top, file contains full path name. I am just going to hover over and read the tooltip here because it explains it pretty thoroughly, although it probably could be worded a bit better. I think some of the words are misspelled here, or just different words that need to be in here, but it gets the point across. So if the file name of, I believe this should be or, if the file name or URL does not fit into 100 characters, then create a text file with the full path or URL as the first line and set this flag and put the text file's name in the file name field. So it makes sense. So if the directory and file name are super long, more than 100 characters, create a separate text file with the full path name in that text file, and then enter that file name into the file name to import field here. Okay, then we've got our create no log files. So per the tooltip for this, typically an import job would create log files and archive the account imported. So it's the archive file that I mentioned earlier. But if you run multiple import jobs scheduled to run simultaneously, incorrectly in parentheses there, they may interfere with each other. They may interfere with each other writing the files, so turn this flag on. So if you're going to have multiple iterations of this job running at the same time, maybe each one for importing into different account groups, for example, it is advised to turn this flag on. However, just keep in mind that then no log file is going to be recorded. I'm going to leave that one off for us so we can see that being recorded. And then finally, we have use CA-Link group names. So this is related to CA-Link interfaces, which are very much beyond the scope of this course. We may have mentioned them once or twice previously, but certainly have not gotten into detail with anything related to CA-Link. But if you are familiar, what this flag will do is use the group names from the external database via CA-Link, and will create account groups in the local BPOS database based on those. Cool, that covers our job options here. So just to summarize, as this scheduled job is configured now, which I have not yet saved, but I will in just a second, I have no schedule saved because I'm just going to be running this manually. The job is going to be looking for the file that we saw, which is named import accounts and is located in this import directory. It is going to skip the first line of that file during import. It's going to create account records based on the import file using the standard import format and place them into the account group called Tier 1B. And then the log file containing the archive data of accounts that have been imported is going to be saved and appended into this archive directory here. So let me just save this. Well, I'm going to get a little prompt here because I don't have a schedule set up. That's okay. Now before I run it, I just want to show you that the account group for Tier 1B is currently empty. Cool, so let's head back there. We'll reopen this job and we will run it to see what happens. I am just going to pull up Smart Controller so we can confirm the job starting and finishing. There we go. So we can see that message had been sent to Smart Controller. We can see that the job was started and it finished. It added 5 accounts and it updated 0. Go ahead and save that. And if we go ahead and look at the account list, I will need to close that and reopen that. Cool, so we've got those 5 accounts that we saw were successfully imported. And if we go ahead and look at that file directory again, notice that the import file is now gone because it has been successfully imported. And if we go ahead and look at in our archive directory, we do now have this file that was just created, which is called accounts imported, as I said it would be. And if we open that up, it looks remarkably similar to the file that we had seen earlier. Now, as I said, as this job continues to run successfully, each time that it does so, the additional accounts that have been imported, their account records and the data will just be appended here, so just added beneath what we've got already, and that will just continuously do that over and over again each time that the job is run successfully. Cool, but that is really all there is to it. Obviously, with doing this manually here, it's a bit different than a live system with the schedule being set and having the job run automatically based on the schedule. But regardless, the principles behind the job and its functionality do remain the same. This is a very time-efficient way and relatively simple way to import account records into the local database. So as we've seen, I've only done a handful of account records here that we've imported and only imported a fraction of the possible account fields that we could import. But yeah, imagine how much time this could save or would save to have this set up and used to import, hundreds or even thousands of account records, and with much more data for each one as well. But yeah, that will be it for this lesson. Like I said, it would be on the shorter side. Thanks as always for your time and attention. Until next time.